Alright, welcome back, and today, as you can see, we're going to talk about the pentatonic scales. And there's three main pentatonic scales. One is the major pentatonic, the other one is the minor pentatonic, and the third one is the blues scale, which is the minor pentatonic plus one extra note. And this is probably where most of you started out when you were starting out with the guitar. You just picked a pentatonic position that you learned somewhere and kind of, make do with that and make some solos and maybe start some melodies. So now that you know all your major scales and minor scales, you can actually look at the pentatonic scales from an advantage point in that these are actually direct derivations of the major and minor scale. So that's how we're going to look at them, and then we're going to get into a bit of detail about the major scale pentatonic, which is actually underused because it's actually has a really, really cool sound that sometimes we don't take advantage of. Then we're going to move on to the minor pentatonic, and then we have a look at the blues scale. All right? So let's get right to it. I'm going to start now with the major pentatonic scale, explain to you how it's built, related to the major scale, and then we'll look at the cage system again, 5 positions for each of these scales, and you'll be able to play them in any key, all over the fretboard, without any problems at all. So the pentatonic scale is actually the same exact thing as the major scale. So if you learned your major scales all over the fretboard with your cage system that we did in the major scales video, all you have to do now is take out 2 notes. So it's very, very simple. And the pentatonic scale is called pentatonic because it's made up of 5 tones. And technically you could come up with any scale that has 5 notes in them and call it a pentatonic. But because of how pervasive these are in popular music, the pentatonic scales are usually the major and minor pentatonic scales. And the way we achieve the major pentatonic scale is very, very simple. We take a C major scale, so we go from C to C using all the notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and we take out the 4th note and the 7th note. That means the F and the B are gone. So the F here we don't play, and then we go to A and we skip the B and we play the C. Okay, so it still sounds major because we still keep the major 3rd. This is a key note. Okay, that makes it sound a bit open and happy. But we get rid of the F and the B. Now, the significance of the F and the B is that they are where the half step sits in the major scale. Remember, it was the formula for the major scale. The half steps always were between E and F and B and C. So now we take out these 2, and we end up with a scale that has no half steps. And half steps are responsible for most of the dissonance in a scale. And that's probably why people find this scale a bit boring. It's because there's no tension to it. It's very, very easy it's easy to play. It's very easy to use it. But it's really hard to come up with something significant because there's no way of creating tension and then releasing it. So you have to be very smart about using it, and we'll have a look at that as well. So I'm going to show you now the 5 positions all over the fretboard. And they're very simple. They're the same basic system as the caged major scale system, but without the B and the F. Okay, I'm still going to show you a few of them, and then we're going to go from close-up and see all of them. So let's take an example. Let's take the 3rd position we did for C major. Okay, all you have to do, you don't even have to look at the close-up. All you have to do is go through the scale, and every time you hit a B or an F, you just get rid of it. So it will be like this. 5-8, 5-7, I drop the 8 here, 5-7, 5-7 again, I'm going to drop the 4 because it's a B, 5-8 without the 6, which was an F, and 5-8 again, because this 7 was a B. Okay, so this is what I end up with, all right? And my roots, as always, are where they were for the cage system, okay? So nothing changes about that. We're still in the 3rd position, shape of G, right? And we're still playing it. We just get rid of the F and the B. Another quick example, we can take the 5th position, which in major was like this. Okay, get rid of all the B's and F's, and we end up like this. Okay, you can do it with all positions. Go ahead, actually, if you like, try to do it by yourself without looking at the close-ups, and then in a few seconds we're going to have close-ups with all the tabs, and you can double check it. Sequences are very important when you learn the pentatonic scales because it's always they break up the pattern and they allow you to kind of break away from the linearity of it. But also because just because of the structure of the scale where we have only 2 notes per string, it makes a technically challenging exercise out of pretty much any sequence you want to try. So I'm going to give you 3 sequences. This first one is the groups of 4 that we saw in the major scale. And it goes something like this. We take all the notes of the pentatonic scale. We're just going to stick to this position, which I think most of you will be familiar with. And we're going to play the first 4 notes. Then we're going to move to the second note of the scale, which is on the 8th fret, and we do 4 more. And then we do 4 more. And we follow this pattern. Okay, when we get to the high note, we go all the way back. From the highest note, 4 notes down. Second to last, we do 4 more. Then the third, and so on. Now, if you notice, I have to do this all the time. Those rolls that we saw when we first started with sequences, now they're all over the place. And that's just because of the structure of the pentatonic scales. There's only 2 notes, so any sequence that's even, you know, that's what you have to do. So great exercise, and also, as always, try not to play like this. Try to play with the tip of the finger and only adapt when you need to do the roll. Okay, don't start playing like this all the time, because then you get a bunch of noise. Okay, so as always, you can actually practice with distortion. Once you have it under your fingers, turn the distortion on and try to be as clean as possible. So maybe try to do something like this. Okay, don't let it sound like that. Okay, holding the notes down. So this will ensure that you'll actually play with even tone, even speed and sound, and also it will allow you to be faster and more agile as you progress. Okay, so here's a close-up of this sequence with groups of 4. Alright, you can see how versatile this scale is. Only 5 notes. We can go from the Yellow River all the way to the Mississippi, as we'll see with the blues scale. And but anyway, let's get back to the sequences. We're going to have a sequence of 3 now. So again, very simple. We move up 3 notes, then down, then up, then up. So it goes like this. The first 3 notes, the second 3 notes, third. So I always go, if I have 10 notes, I go 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Once I'm here, I can work my way back, and it goes like this. And so on. Okay, you get the drill. These can be played actually a lot faster than their major and minor scale counterparts. It's because we have fewer notes, and the pentatonic scale is actually a lot easier to play fast than the major scale, just because it's so symmetrical. You know, you go down and up always. Doesn't matter how many strings you play or whatever, in what position, you always end up with 2 notes per string. Okay, so you can try to actually speed this up with the metronome and use the metronome table to go, you know, at higher speeds. That's actually very important, because when you improvise with the pentatonic, fluidity is a must, and even if you don't play as fast as you can, being able to play very fast means you are very relaxed, and that will give your phrasing a lot better sound. So I'm going to show this again from Closeup, the groups of 3, and then we'll move on to the last sequence. And the final sequence is the hardest one and the better workout for your left hand, because it involves a lot of rolls all the time. You're just going to be jumping around, on the same fret on different strings. And we're going to do groups of thirds. That means that we take same sequence of notes. Maybe we have, again, 10 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we play it like this. We play 1, 3, 2, 4, okay, 3, 5, 4, 6, and so on. So we just kind of alternate. We skip one note every time. And so with the pentatonic, it's a lot harder than it was with the major and minor scales, just because of the structure of the pentatonic. Again, just the fact that we have only 2 notes per string. And so it goes something like this. We go 5 on the 6th string, and then instead of playing the 8, we skip the 8, and we move to the 5 on the 5th string. So we do this. And then we go from 8 on the 6th to 7 on the 5th, and then 5 and 5. And it's very strange, because it almost looks as if you're playing this finger first, and then this part and half of the scale, and then you play this other half. So we go first half, second half, first, second. Okay, so that's a bit of a mess for your brain, and it's going to be a bit hard to do it in the beginning, but you work it out. And then to work our way back, we do the same exact thing. So this time we will start with this half of the scale. So you can see that every time we hit a spot where we have a lot of 5s or a lot of 7s, I have to do the rolls all the time. I'm sorry. You see, we find these spots where we have all these notes on the same fret, and that's just a roll all the time. Actually, the index finger will do rolls throughout the exercise. So it's a very good workout. This one you might not be able to bring it up to incredible speeds, but really it's more about dexterity, so don't worry too much about that. So now we're going to move on with a little excerpt from a song, and this will give you a bit of an indication of how you can use the major pentatonic scale to some, I hope, beautiful effect. hope you like what you just heard. There was a little solo from Written in the Sand, which is a song of my Power Word Fantastic album. And the reason I picked that is because it's completely and entirely made of pentatonic scale notes. There's pretty much, until maybe the end, there's a couple of notes from the major scale, but it's really all based on the pentatonic scale. And the major pentatonic scale is often forgotten by guitar players because it's a simple sounding scale. But there's a trick to it, and the trick is to give enough, enough space to each note. Maybe use some pauses and some silences to kind of create expectation in the listener, because you won't be able to give them the dissonances. So what you can do is just create an expectation of the dissonance into the listener and play especially with the other chords. So if there's a chord that includes maybe a B or an F, then you can use that chord against your scale and you still be able to create some kind of tension and release like that. And the good thing about it is that it's so smooth. It sounds very, very smooth, and it sounds very easy to listen to. And so when you manage to get the dissonance in there, it sounds a lot more powerful than if you could just access it, just by playing a B. So hiding, the B and making it very subtle actually creates, to me, it's a very good sound. And so I'm going to show you this, how I play this solo in a second. Actually, today we're going to graduate from tabs. So since it's a pretty slow thing, and I'm going to show it to you from, very slow, we're actually going to have a close-up later, and you won't get the tab. So you just have to follow along and try to figure it out a little by ear and a little by just watching me. So by this time in this series of videos, I think you're ready to do that. So no more tabs. Okay? And so that's actually the next step in our ear training program, right? So you just listen to something and you figure it out by yourself. So the chords are very simple. They are E, B, and A mainly. So they're just three major chords from the E major scale. And I just play them a bit differently. I always leave the B and the E string open, so they create some interesting harmony. I play E major, which is kind of like an E fifth, and then when I go to B, I have the extra E, and then when I go to A, I have this B here that makes it a major at ninth. But really the basics is this. Okay, I mean, this sounds a bit prettier, but it doesn't change the harmony at all. And actually I'm using this, the piezo on my Parker, which is, gives you this acoustic sound, which is a really neat feature. And I actually recorded it into my looper. And I'm doing something like this. I'm doing E to B to A. Okay, that's a couple of times. Then I switch the order. I go A, B, E, and B. And then the same thing, but I add one more chord, which is the C sharp minor, and down to A. So 4 chords, that's only 4 chords from the major scale of E. And well, I'm just going to show you how I play it, and then we'll have it again from close-up. There's one more use for the major pentatonic scale that I want to discuss really quickly, and it's the major blues. The blues usually is played in minor keys, and with 7th chords. But the major blues is a bit weird because most people don't really like it. It sounds a bit too much like country music, but it's not country music, so it's kind of caught in between. And it's very simple. It's a simple 12-bar blues progression, and it uses only major chords. And it's okay, it's a good way to practice your pentatonics, actually. That's how I would suggest you use it. And it sounds something like this. This is a little progression I have in my looper. And you can take these same chords and just play the C major pentatonic. And it sounds something like this. You see, I'm not really used to this because I already sneaked in a blues note that we're going to check out later. So give it a try, write down a little blues chord progression, all major chords, 1, 4, and 5, and play around with it, see if you can come up with something useful. And if not, we're going to move now to the minor pentatonic scale, which is the one most of you already know, and we're going to get into some more detail with that. So now, if everything is clear with the major pentatonic scales, we're going to move on to the minor pentatonic scales. And the relationship between major and minor with the pentatonics is exactly the same as it was with the diatonic scale, so the regular major and regular minor scales. So we won't get into that. If you have any doubts about that, go back to the videos about the major and minor scales, and this should be pretty clear. So if we take the pentatonic scale, we still want to get rid of those half steps. That's how it works. And in the major scale, it was a matter of going to, remember in C, we were going for the 4th and 7th note, which is F and B. That's where the semitones were, and we were getting rid of them. So we would take out F and B. But if we talk about the minor scale, and for now I'm just going to talk about A minor to make it the same as C major. If you check out this scale out, I play A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, just a normal A minor scale. Well, the B and the F now sit in different positions. Okay, so the formula for the minor pentatonic scale is to take out not the 4th and the 7th, but the 2nd and the 6th. Okay, the 2nd and 6th is where in a minor key you have those half steps. You have it between the 2nd note and the 3rd, so between B and C, and then you have it between E and F, between the 5th and 6th. So we get rid of those two notes, and the result is this. Instead of playing A minor, I play A minor pentatonic. Like that. Okay, we're actually going to look at all the 5 positions of the cage system in 1 second, and we're going to do that in C. So before we do that, let me explain to you how we would end up with the pentatonic in C. Same exact thing as A. We take an E minor scale, which is a C minor scale, which is C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, and we just go for the 2nd note and we go for the 6th note. Okay, and what we find is that we have to drop the D and we have to drop the A flat. Same exact thing, we end up with a minor pentatonic scale. All right, so let's move on to the cage system now. I'm going to give you in C minor all the positions you need to go from the fret 0 to the 12th fret, and that means you'll know every single position for every single pentatonic scale in a minor key. Very well then, so now we're going to look at the cage system again, and we're going to do it in C minor. Now the easiest way to do it would be A minor, because as you know, it will be exactly the same thing as C major. But we're going to complicate it just a little bit and do it in C minor. So I'm not going to play it for you. I will give you a close-up with tabs after this little break. But I would like you to, first I'll explain it to you really quick, and then I would like you to pause the video and try to figure out all the 5 positions by yourself. And then you can go on to the next little section, which is the close-up with the tablature, and make sure you've done it right, okay? I help you out with 1 position, and then you have to do all the other 4. So what you would do is take the 5 positions of C minor, the regular scale, and all you have to do is go out on each one of them and just find the 2nd note and the 6th note, which we saw before. They were D, remember, and A flat. These were the 2 notes that we have to take out. And so all you have to do is go through the minor scale and simply pick each one of those and get rid of them. That's really that simple. And you can write it down as you do it if it helps you, or you can just do it, and try to memorize it by simple repetition. Okay, whatever works for you. And I'm going to give you one example. So one position we have is this one. Okay, this is the second position of C minor. All you have to do is go through it and get rid of each A flat and get rid of every D. Okay, so instead of playing the first octave like this, you will play like this. And then you just keep following. Every time you hit one of those two notes, an A flat or a D, you don't play it. So I won't play this third fret here on the second string. I'll move right next to the next one. And that's how I'll play. Okay? Get rid of all the notes you don't need. And so you get this. And of course it fits right over a minor chord because that's what it's for. Okay, so maybe you can pause the video just now and give this a try by yourself. Do it in C minor, then make sure you've done it right by checking with the close-ups. And then before you continue, I would probably do this with a bunch of different roots. So you go all the way, A minor, then I'll do B minor, then I'll do C minor. Oh, by the way, one little thing before we do that. Remember, everything you want to do with switching from one root to the next, everything we did for major and minor scales count. So if you want to play, once you figure out how to play C minor, you want to do D minor or F minor. If you know your scales, you know where the roots are, just move them and play the exact same fingering. Okay, I don't have to go over this again because we've done it, but in case it's not clear, just go back to the major and minor scales videos and you'll see exactly how to switch from one root to the next. Okay, so try this exercise with C minor, pentatonic, and I'll be right back. Alright, so there's three main uses for the minor pentatonic scale. One is to use it as a substitute of a regular minor progression. So the first exercise you should do is go back to whatever chord progression you used on the minor scales video, where I asked you to record or loop a short chord progression with minor chords to improvise on top. So that would be a great way to start. And you see kind of the same difference that you saw when the little excerpt that I just played for you from Written in the Sand, which is a chord progression that would fit a regular major scale perfectly, but we chose to go with the pentatonic. And that gave the whole thing a different sound, a bit more open and a bit more ambiguous. So you get kind of the same feel with the minor pentatonic, but of course on a darker mood. And then there's one more use, which is the minor blues. The minor blues is kind of like the regular blues, which is a third use. And the minor blues is really weird because it's a kind of in between the blues and the regular diatonic chord progression. That's because it's made up of three minor chords. And these chords are the 1, the 4, and the 5. So I'm playing in E now, so I would play E minor, A minor, and B minor. Now this chord progression could be just a regular diatonic chord progression. So you can actually fit a minor scale on top of this, you know, with no problems at all. But if you give it the right spin and the right expression, you know, technique, so you do a few bends, a few vibratos, you know, a little bit of that, then you can approximate the sound of the blues. And this is actually a form of blues. It's called the minor blues. So what I'll do now to kind of demonstrate this difference is give you a little chord progression, which is very simple. I'll play E minor, no sevenths, you know, that makes it even more ambiguous. A minor, and then I go back to E minor, and then I do B minor. Okay, it's not the most creative chord progression, but for demonstration it will work. And what I'll do is just kind of switch between a more bluesy sound and a more poppy sound, you know, like you would hear on a regular song. And you'll get to hear the difference. So for the blues part, I'll try to be as expressive as possible and use those little pieces of, you know, technique that are familiar to the blues. So maybe bends. Okay, something like that. Now, if I want a more poppy sound and more diatonic, all I have to do is try to change my phrasing. All right, so maybe not as many bends, not as many wide vibratos, and maybe I'll just try to, you know, move to notes that are not as blues sounding. So it might go something like this. You know, something like that, more reminiscent of a regular minor scale. So this is pretty much it for the minor aspect of it, and now we're going to look at the fun part, which is the blues application of the minor pentatonic. And the most common use of the minor pentatonic scale is as a blues scale. That means we're going to use a chord progression that's based on seventh chords. This is a strange chord progression, and if you're more interested in that, you can go look at, you know, all kinds of different resources about the blues. But the main idea is that no key in the world has 3 seventh chords, you know, dominant chords. But the blues does, and so it uses the first, fourth, and fifth chord all with a seventh dominant shape. And that means if we do it in A, we have A seventh, we have D seventh, and then we have E seventh. So there's nothing you can do with this. You will never find a major or minor key that fits. The good thing is that for some weird reason, actually there is a reason, but it takes forever to explain it, the minor pentatonic scale sounds good over 3 dominant chords that have pretty much nothing to do with it. And so we're just going to take that for, you know, as truth and simply enjoy the results. And what happens is we have this very basic chord progression. I recorded something that's very, very simple on my loop pedal. It's just A, D, and eventually E. And we follow the pattern of a regular 12-bar blues progression. And what we do is use the minor pentatonic in the key of the first chord. Okay? So I know it's weird because this chord, it's a 7th chord and it's a major chord. But we're going to use the minor pentatonic of that note. So if I'm playing this in A, my pentatonic is this one, A pentatonic. Minor, okay? Don't play the major one, will sound like crap. So we do the minor one. Okay, and for some strange reason, again, it works. So this is the chord progression. I'm going to hit play now, and I'll just improvise just a little bit on top of it with the minor pentatonic scale. Okay, something like that. Very simple stuff, and we just stick to pretty much one position. You can still do a little bit of a weird sound. As you notice when I went up, try to land on notes that don't agree with the chord, but really it's unescapable. You'll end up sounding like you're doing some kind of blues stuff. Okay, so that's the basics, and please go ahead and record or find anywhere on the internet, I'm sure, rhythm track is based on the blues. Best of all if it's the regular chord progression 1, 4, 5, and give it a try. You just remember, use always the minor pentatonic scale of the first chord. If it's a B blues, you have to play B minor pentatonic. If it's a blues in E, you have to play E minor pentatonic. And try to experiment a bit, not just with this position that I use, but with all of them. Okay, these will give you different landing points, and so it will sound a bit different every time. Okay, and so now we're going to move on to the final chapter of this workshop, which is the blues scale. So we're going to take exactly this same scale, but add one more note to it. And this is the sound of the blues scale. The blues scale is very simple, very useful, but also very simple to build. All you have to do is know your minor pentatonic scales. So in this case I was playing A. And all you have to do is add one note to it, which is the flat 5. The flat 5 is the note that divides the octave in two equal parts, and it's very, very dissonant. And in the case of A, the note is E flat. Okay, so I play A, C, D, E flat, E. So I get this really cool chromatic part here. Okay, and so I don't have to do anything, and it sounds bluesy. So it's really cool. And that's the sound of it. And everything I explained about the regular blues applies here. So, bends, a lot of slides, a lot of really cool things. And just add this note once in a while. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is this note, if you use it as an actual important note, which means you use it as a landing point after a phrase or as a beginning point of a phrase, you have to be careful how it sits on each of the three chords. Okay, so you can't just throw it around and hope for the best. You really actually have to know, well, does E flat work on this chord and on that chord, and so on. So sometimes give it a try anyway. For example, over the E chord, it may sound really strange to add an E flat. And sometimes it is, but because of the blues and because the way it's built with non-diatonic concepts, you might get away with a lot more than you think. So just play with it, use it on all chords, and then decide where you like it, where you don't, and so on. Okay, and just one more close-up of this. I'm going to give you all 5 positions on the neck for the blues scale. But this is very simple stuff, so please go ahead and try to do it by yourself. Simply take all your pentatonic caged minor scales and just add the flat 5 to all of them. So if you do it in A, it's E flat. All right, let's get to the close-ups now, and then there's one more little thing that I want to show you before we finish this video. what you just heard now is a little excerpt from the lead of Power Over Fantastic. And the reason I put it in there is just to show you that the fact that something is called a blues scale, or that a minor pentatonic is usually associated with the blues and more straight rock, doesn't mean you can apply it to pretty much anything you want. And if you listen to the solo, you'll see that it goes all over the place. There's Phrygian dominant, there's pentatonic, there's minor scales, there's all kinds of weird stuff, and you can mix it and match it any way you like. And so that's what's most important for me that you understand from this series of videos, is that all this is just tools and nothing else. And they're really worth nothing unless you apply them to your music. And so learn the scales. I know I told you to memorize everything in all keys, in all positions, but once you've done that, you have to break free of it, and it's very important. And don't spend so much time learning scales and chords and theory and gathering all the information if you don't have time to use it. Okay, so do what you want. Whatever I show you here, if I can help you with anything, that's great. But at one point or another, you have to take control of it and say, well, I'm going to use it for this, I'm going to use it for that, and I like the sound of that, and I don't like the sound of this one, and he says it's great, but I don't like it. Well, if you don't like it, don't use it, or change it, or look for another option. Okay? So this concludes our video on the pentatonics, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.